Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Nigerians, please be assured that we are implementing many measures to reduce the cost of living at home. I commend the governors, particularly in Kebbi, Niger, Jigawa, Kwara, Nasarawa, and other Southwest governors that have embraced our agricultural production program. I urge other states to join the federal government in investing in mechanized farming. We are playing our part by supplying fertilizer and making tractors and other farm equipment available. Last week, the Federal Executive Council approved establishing a local assembly plant for 2,000 John Deere tractors, combine harvesters, disc riders, bottom plows, and other farm equipment. The plant has a completion time of 6 months.
Well, Nigeria has clocked 64 today, and as usual, all of the ancillaries that go with the Independence Day celebration, starting off with a presidential broadcast to mark the Independence Day has kicked off, and we're expecting more in forms of march past and all of that. But then there are inherent problems, issues. A lot of Nigerians looked forward to probably a prize regime that would kick off today. But conspicuously, that was missing from the presidential broadcast speech delivered by President Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Notably, he talked about some of the policies enacted by his government, talked about his plans for Nigeria, which will pick up, in a few. But then let me let you know that in the studio with me is none other than a partner in shaping policy, and of course in the Nigerian spirit. I do have Best Blessing Ahichie for company this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning, TC. Happy Independence Day, my fellow Nigerian.
Oh, we're getting old.
Yeah, 64. A 64-year-old man in Nigeria or today anywhere in the world will probably be a grandpa or getting ready to be one. So Nigeria is no longer a baby. Nigeria has come of age since 1960 when the country gained independence from Britain. And so far, there have been several challenges, but there have also been successes for Nigeria. Besides, Nigeria holds lots of prospects, being that Nigeria is a country blessed with abundant natural resources, TC. Now, when you think about the natural resources that Nigeria is endowed with, you can't but feel this, pride that, oh yes, we have arable land, we have solid minerals in abundance, we've got crude oil and so many other things, not to mention the talented citizens that Nigeria has and the youthful, strong, energetic population that the country has.
Well, we're looking forward to how we can tap from all of these resources, take advantage of the enormosity of resources that we have, to chart a new course, to get better, to develop. I mean, it's not something that will happen, quickly. It's not something
overnight.
It's going to take a process. But for you to, even get on the wheels to grind that process, there's a lot of things that a lot of school of thought believe that should be put in place. The kind of leadership, the willingness of the populace to also go in the direction steered by because you have some leader going in one direction and everyone feels, we're not in the right direction. That might upset the balance and, not all go well. But we do have a team of analysts personnel who will be joining us on the program as we take a look at certain issues, in relation to the Independence Day. We're going to look at state creation, state police, calls for the review of the Constitution, and of course, there's been a clamor for a return to parliamentary democracy and the need for free and fair elections in Nigeria, which, if you had to consider the just concluded Edo State governorship election, I don't know what you would make out of it. I'm sure that's your home state. I'm certain about that. So I don't know I wouldn't want you to place your personal thoughts out now. Just good morning to you, Kunle.
Good morning. Happy Independence Day, and it's a pleasure to be here.
All right, glad to have you. I don't know if you listened to the presidential speech, in as much as we didn't want to jump right into that right now. I want to start off from the angle of the various geopolitical zones that now have development commissions. Latest is the Southeast Development Commission. Akin to state creation, do you think some of these development commissions that have been set up would complement the need for state creation?
First and foremost, I need to critically state that the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria does not recognize these regions. Regions are a contraption of political, expediency to try and create development across board. This is not to say that the Southeast doesn't deserve, considering we have decided to break an anomaly which is totally off the Constitution with creating commissions per region. And now the real question is, have these commissions been developmental? Now, to extend whether the commissions help improve state creation. First and foremost, I think we've not managed the states we have presently. I do not support and do not think in any manner anything has helped to project state creation. For now, we even have redundant states. IGR of states are far below par. We take away the top 5 states performing. So it gives us a clear critical. If states are underperforming, why would we create more? Is the question. I think everyone should be asking the federal government. If we continue at this rate, I would not be surprised if every street has a governor eventually in the next 50 years.
Okay, looking at the way state creation started in Nigeria, it began from regions. You had then different regions. It was more like a regional thing. And after some time, they began the creation of states. And then we had some number of states, 12, moved on to 19. And then we had like 21, it moved on. So it seemed like every head of state at a certain time added more states. The idea behind the 3 tiers of government that Nigeria currently operates, I believe, and so it is the way is to bring governments close to the people and to have government at every level that would trickle down development. Now, looking at it, Nigeria has 36 states currently, including if you add the federal capital territory, then would have like 37, but 36 states, and we have 774 local governments. In terms of governance, do you think the state structure have been able to deliver good governance to Nigeria, as would the regional system that was operated if we had continued with that?
First and foremost, the reason why regions were taken out of Nigeria, or the breakdown of the structure of governance in Nigeria were taken out, was post the 1966 Civil War, which people saw themselves more by regions, and those regions meant a more drive for ethnicity than becoming or uniting as a country. And that's why regions were taken out. And for the social structure of a country, I would never advise for region to be part of this conversation. Whenever people talk about state creation with bringing government closer to the people, the first question I always ask is, what's the use of local government? So I think we're more in love with the nomenclature of governor or having your own state than we are with development of the country entirely. With the present local government autonomy, local governments should and will be able to do more. I've always said that without local government in place or an autonomous local government, democracy it will not thrive. I've always put it forward that the first handshake of government to the people is local government. Now, in relation to state regions' performance against states, I think it's a no-brainer. States perform far well. They've ensured, like you said, they've ensured, a deeper breakdown to towns that might have not been developed. Let's say without somewhere like, let's look at the South. Looking at somewhere like Asaba, if Asaba was not a state capital, I don't think Asaba would be exactly where it is. And same with Uyo, same with let's go up north, same with somewhere like Gusau, same with somewhere like the Jigawa state capital. And these things, yes, states have brought a little, but the highest corruption in Nigeria is actually at state level, not at local government or federal level. And these are things that have not been checked. Taxes from states are being manipulated by state governors and the internal IGR have also been tampered with. So we will be discussing regions versus states. Regions are so 1342, if I could explain that. Countries don't function in that kind of parameter again. I don't know why Nigeria is presently on a drive to go back to the 60s. It wasn't that things were good, the world was different then. So I will not support or compare at any level regions and states. Thank you.
Well, some of these states were created to appease political tensions, to, cater for ethnic interest. Now, do you think that creation of states have gone a long way in, some covering, or would I use the word now, balancing some of the inequalities that gave rise to them initially? Because we've seen, I think from 19, it's moved, and then we have 36 states, including the FCT. Yet there's still a clamor for more states. So state creation, do you think we can see an end to it? Don't you think there's going to always be a need for some people to want that autonomy, just like you have at community level, various communities wanting autonomy and all that? Do you think the state system adequately addresses the Nigerian situation, which is very unique, I must add?
I think that, and this is my crack-cut answer for this. I think that if local governments were more functional, we wouldn't have to bother about state creation. I think one of the biggest mistakes has been the deficiency in local governments, especially under democracy. Local governments were more functional under the military than they are under democracy. And I would say this is what brings the clamor for the need for more development. And like I said in my previous statement, as long as local government adequately catered for and ensured to thrive, we will continue to see the clamor. Now, state creation on its own will always be people's thirst for feeling marginalized in a democracy, and would want the dividends to hit a particular part at the time. But this also shows the dysfunction between the three levels of government. Let's be honest, the biggest problem local governments have had in Nigeria is the disconnect between it and the federal. Now, the state governments assume that the local governments are under them. They are not under them. They're a separate, entire tier of government, totally away from the conversation. So I think there will always be a clamor as long as there is no economic dividend or delivery of governance to the people. There will always be clamor for different changes, expansion on things. But I do not think that this would be healthy or would improve the growth of Nigeria as a country.
All right. Earlier, you mentioned that the state system doesn't look like, not using your words exactly, but it does suggest that you feel the state system has not really delivered on what it was supposed to deliver, being that some states are struggling with IGR. So, what would you say fundamentally is the reason why some states barely exist? But for the monthly allocations from the federal government, some states will be non-existent. What could you say is the fundamental reason for this?
There are many reasons for this. The first and foremost would be a lot of things which are placed on the exclusive list of the non-exclusive list, the exclusive list and non-exclusive list of the National Assembly, which doesn't allow states mine or refine or deal with their own resources. I think that's the first biggest problem this state governments have, states' performance have. The second would be no initiative by government, that's state governments, no initiative by state governors to actually want to do anything different. The third would be the poor understanding of politics and how it works, and that will be on the people. That generally is on the citizens of the state. And then fourth will be, I don't know how governors have done it, but they've invented a system in which they've been able to trick the people that they do not look at governors or blame governors for anything. And this, I think that culture, it was infused in us as regards the time we've had with the military. So I think that that particular deviation from demanding the dividends of democracy from governors has been a massive and huge problem. When you look at governors' inefficiencies, you look at governors states are actually in charge of secondary education that has failed. They are in charge of secondary healthcare that has failed. Nobody has called state governors out on that. It's always been, conversation has always been primary healthcare and federal. And I think that's where we tend to, and even as people within the media and CSOs and, generally we tend to play between local government and federal. And there's a vacuum that's left to demand what exactly states should produce, states should act. So most people don't want to, also Nigerians, most people don't want to state that or stay in a state and develop it. Most drive is towards urban city centers, which have already been developed by other governors who are probably performing or states that are performing. Now, I would like to clear an anomaly. There's the general assumption that the best performing states in Nigeria are some particular ones because of some particular amount of money they bring in as IGR. But if you juxtapose that against, let me give an example. Lagos is an example. If Lagos is bringing in about $500 million a month, you juxtapose that across Lagos estimated over 25 million, you start to ask the question, is Lagos really profitable? And then when you start to look at it like that from a business angle, you can start to query what exactly Lagos should be projecting. So Lagos even is performing far below par. If you juxtapose that with somewhere like Akwa Ibom, which has a general monthly revenue of about 250 million and a population less than 4 million. If you juxtapose that and cross-reference the GDP of someone living in Akwa Ibom, it means that Akwa Ibom is performing way above Lagos. And I think we in Nigeria try to ignore the actual math of it, and we look at the bulk of it. And I think the bulk of it doesn't necessarily translate how states have performed.
Okay, so if you look at it that way, now you're looking at population versus IGR to actually appraise a state. Are there other indices that could be used to appraise a state? Sometimes the focus is on the IGR. Could we look at certain other factors? Could you point us to that?
Yeah, yes. Like I made mention, this will sound like I'm supporting Akwa Ibom. But you now look at state-owned businesses. Akwa Ibom has an airline which is thriving and which works across Nigeria. Akwa Ibom has also been able to build, a gas plant, a state private gas plant, And then you look at somewhere like Abia, who has decided, there was law that was passed in 2022, which allows states to generate their own electricity to a particular quota. Now I was thinking that the mega city will jump on this, but the mega city is far behind. Abia has gone far ahead. A state like Edo also is in public-private partnership to start its own refinery of about 10,000, 20,000 barrels, I think, which should which should start early next year. So these states have been able to develop businesses that will thrive, which will earn its forex, etc., and a particular amount of money. Akwa Ibom has also developed a stadium which works fully infrastructure. Most people translate state development by, so I'm sorry to say, flyovers. And, people, when you go to a state like, let's say Rivers, they'll say the former governor worked well because he put quite a lot of flyovers around the town, mitigating its natural beauty. Because if I remember while growing up, River State used to be known as the Garden City. Now it's more, I think it could be called the Cement City. So these indices are thriving businesses, security within the state, general operation of the state, and most people just look at the money that comes in or whatever. Now I'll give you an example. Just imagine if other ports were open, like Calabar Port, the on airport in Rivers, the ports in Edo, and maybe Kogi State decides to dredge water towards that. Will Lagos make so much money from the ports again? I don't think it will, because the entire north will be moving in a direction. But other states have not been ingenious to employ this or to think about this or to fight for this. So I think that generally, we are not in the business of governance to develop and raise a particular bar. We're in the business of governance to sit in a chair.
Well, I'd like to, move the conversation in another direction. Yes, we're talking about state, but then there's also been a back and forth, an argument of some sort about the need or not for state policing. While some school of thought believe that it will help reduce crime, better manage police funds and all that, some other persons who are against it believe that politicians might hijack the system. If it were state police, the governor, who is assumed the chief security officer, might now have access to using the state police against opponents and all that. And then the issue of the state police not synergizing with the federal police structure, all of those. But I'd want to pick ahead. I'd like to find out what your thoughts are on that, then probably we'll just, steer the conversation in that direction.
First and foremost, let me first place a premise before I say what I'm about to say. When you look at the way state governors have handled have handled local government elections, I think it's a no-brainer when you're going to bring up the matter of state police. Now, I don't understand, if you look at countries with a population above 100 million, countries in that way have always started bases, local government police, state police, and federal police. The problem we have is that there's no local government police, and security in the Constitution is vested also in the local government chairman, who also is the chief security officer of his local government. Now, you do not build a house with the roof, which I'll call federal police, and you now put in the doors, which you call state police, and there's no foundation, which is the ground, which you call local government police. So I disagree vehemently with state police, especially with the executive powers state governors have presently, the immunity clauses in which they have, the harassment in which it's possible. And for me, state governors have kidnapped, or what they call it, they've kidnapped the legislature. I don't know how they did that. Well, there's the quality of people we have in State House of Assemblies. They've kidnapped local governments. Still, it was freed by the federal governments right now, but I'm still thinking there's a little hold on it as long as they control the elections in the states. And right now, you want to grant them police. For me, that is recipe for a total, absolute dictatorship by state governors. So I do not agree with the system, and I do not even think state police is a sensible idea. Not at this time, not with this kind of politicians and not without, most especially, a local government police. So if I were to advise, a local government police comes first, then a state police can come, and then we can have a federal police.
But if you look at the local vigilantes, not for now called local police, we just have local vigilantes in several local governments in Nigeria. Some of them are funded and even organized by the state government. If there is no state police that acts as a coordinator over some of them, don't you think that the efficiency in security that Nigerians seek would not be achieved?
I need to clearly state this. It seems there's a very large anomaly in which people assume that the local government is under the state government. I need to rephrase this and reclear this clearly. Constitutionally, local government is a separate tier of government. They do not need the state government for permission or access or any other thing. They can work together, but they are not.
Is that the reality currently in Nigeria? That the local governments are independent in terms of funds, infrastructure, and several other things, governance even. Is that the reality? That they are an independent tier of government?
Do we want to discuss reality, or do we want to discuss what the law of Nigeria is? The reality is a culture that is being created because everybody, including the media, do not know. So it means we should refer to that culture, which is totally wrong and totally an infringement on the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
At this moment, is that an issue of ignorance, people not knowing, or people going with what they see and experience?
I'll give you an example. Sometime early in the time of Governor Seyi Makinde, he sacked elected local government chairman, and the case was taken to court, and he lost. And it was clear that a governor cannot sack local government chairman. And Seyi Makinde's answer was that governors had previously done it, and he thought it was the norm. But according to the law, it's not possible. It's just like a president saying he's sacking a governor. It's also not possible. So what the problem in Nigeria is that we've created a culture of what is totally deviant from what the law or the Constitution backs. So in the case of you're talking local government vigilantes sponsored by state governors. I believe that's still a foothold. And let me make something clear. There's no local government in Nigeria whose FAC allocation without IGR of LG is less than 300 million naira a month. I believe that with even 50 million given to a local government, it can at least get its own police force. 50 million per month deviated from that 300 million. So I state this again. No local government in Nigeria has a FAC allocation less than 300 million. So except that this money is being siphoned and being diverted, which is the reason why it doesn't get to ground, and it seems like local government are powerless. And the reason why governors look so powerful is because they have actually kidnapped the fund FAC allocations of local governments.
I'd like to also, move the conversation again. You've talked about the Constitution, and it feels like everything is just going back to it. State creation, state policing, local government, all back to the Constitution. Yes, there's been various revisions. There have been various metamorphoses of the Nigerian Constitution. And then even what we have as at 1999, we put as amended whenever, we're quoting the Constitution. What do you make out of the Constitution? Some persons believe that what we have now is outdated, and there's also a need for a holistic review. Some constitution, not just an amendment, just like we had during the confab and all the reports. Go back to these things, look at the basics, and try to see if we can have a proper restructuring. So, what are the key areas you feel, we need to review the Constitution? That is, if you belong to that school of thought that the Constitution requires review.
First and foremost, I'd like to start off with this. The Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is not even followed in Nigeria up to 30%. Therein lies the problem. Secondly, we have a lackadaisical National Assembly. The average number of bills passed in a country as large as ours should be about 1,000 bills per 4 years. We barely make 90. I think the best performing National Assembly was the 8th Senate, and they hit about 100 bills. That is far below par, far below par. From 469 National Assembly members is far below par. Nigeria should be operating at least 1,000 bills. So those are the problems. I agree that the Constitution, of course, was written in 1999. There are a lot of world changes that have happened. There are a lot of things that have gone on. And those things need to be readdressed, need to be reorganized. And yes, there's lots of that needs to be done. But we critically need to understand that the biggest problem in Nigeria is that, number one, the people who are in National Assembly, none of them know or understand the Constitution, first and foremost. Okay, let me not give a blanket statement. Let's say less than 10% of them understand that. Then secondly, if this Constitution is not even followed to 30%, what is the guarantee that if we sat down and created a new Constitution, it will even be followed to 15%? Therein lies the problem. So as long as the people of Nigeria, and what empowers the Constitution is the fact that the people of the country understand it. That's what gives the Constitution power. It's not the legal system. It's not the justice system. It's not the National Assembly. It's the people knowing the laws that they are to abide to. It's the people knowing exactly what the country is. That's where the Constitution derives its power. Because when everybody knows what the law is, you can't trump any case, or you can't create a misdemeanor in which you call Abuja a state, or you can't, there are things you can't do. But as long as that Constitution is not known by the people or the government, or followed to even 70%, at least at par minimum, we're not discussing a constitution. We have, like I said, we've created a life and a culture outside the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and accepted that and called it Nigeria, and then mortgaged our responsibilities to the Constitution and blamed the Constitution for it.
All right. One of the reasons why some Nigerians have called for a review of the Constitution is the thought that the Constitution currently does not offer adequate representation for the interests of Nigerians. In the aspect of federalism, there is a thought that there is much emphasis on the federal government being superior, and there's so much emphasis on the federal government. Federalism. There is also that of the minority feeling that the Constitution as it is does not adequately represent the interests of minority, and there are other aspects to this. Now, what's your thought on the representation of the Nigerian Constitution as it is? Do you think there is some need, or there is a need for review of some of it?
Yes, I think there's a need for review, but what I don't understand is when people say a minority is not covered. The Constitution is for Nigerians. If you do not see yourself as a Nigerian, then it might not cover you. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. The Constitution is fair, but on every level, to every Nigerian. It does not selectively pick someone. And then as regards federal power, the truth is, as much as Nigeria thinks it's ready for restructuring, I'll give an example. How has it tried when parts have been broken down and handed over to state governors? I'll give you an example. Like with the Energy Act passed in 2022, it allows state governors to provide electricity to a particular level to their states. Only one state is using that particular law, or one state has made the law beneficial to its people, Abia. When you look at state governors and INEC restructuring local government elections so that state electoral commissions can conduct it. Show me a state that a party, and from Anambra where ABGA wins all the seats to Kwara where APC wins all the seats. Show me where there has been democracy or there has been a free, fair play. We've seen situations in, I think, was it Osun or Ondo, where other parties were not even allowed to participate in the local government elections, and all that was on the ballot was yes or no. That is totally destructive. So I don't think we're ready for the so-called restructuring that we want. Like I've said, state governors have kidnapped the legislature, they've kidnapped local governments, and if they kidnap anything else, it will turn them to emperors of state. So I don't think, and the Constitution is clear on such things, and the Constitution clearly separates such things. The Constitution even doesn't give power to state governors to conduct local government elections. That is still vested in INEC. So it's even a conflagration against the Constitution to have these things done. And the truth is, as much as people that have sworn federal power is more than this, what have they done with the actual state power which has been granted them? And I think we're more into arguing for the conversation that we are being disjointed than looking at the things we have refused to even engage, which already exist. This does not mean I do not believe in the review of the Constitution. I do, but I have a critical question. With what is already operational, what has been done? So you can't ask for more when you haven't actually done more.
All right. So I want to also get in on this at this point. Basically, you agree that there's a need for us to go back to the Constitution and take a look at it. But then initially I'd asked, what aspects do you think we should review? So I'm just going to, pick on a particular aspect of interest, which is the parliamentary system of government. We transited to the presidential system of government sometime in 1979, but then we've still had periodic calls. I mean, constantly there's been calls for us to go back to the parliamentary system. It's been mentioned in some quarters, and there was also a time when it was it was all over social media where people were calling for legislative officers or legislators to function in some part-time capacity, right? I wonder what you make out of these calls and this clamor, and if you feel that the best for Nigeria, considering its uniqueness again. I mean, a country with hundreds of ethnic groups speaking diverse language and a lot of cultures. I mean, diversity of culture and cultural differences. Do you think a parliamentary system would be the way to actually sort Nigeria's democratic issues?
First and foremost, I think that question is a no-brainer, and it's already prevalent in the way Nigeria operates. So if a parliamentary system is based on full legislation, hello, the problem with you is that the legislators are lackadaisical. So you want to move to a system that's totally based on proposition of laws. It doesn't make sense. We're not there yet in our democracy. We have, like I said, we have redundant National Assembly. People who have not, who don't understand or haven't read the Constitution, people who barely even know laws, and you can appeal, or people who even pass laws vis-a-vis, and so that it doesn't look like I'm just yapping them. Let me be very clear with it. People who pass laws without knowing what they passed, vis-a-vis the Electoral Act, where they didn't even know that they were removed as delegates, and when President Muhammadu Buhari signed it, they ran back to him and were screaming, "Blue Mother, but you passed the bill to the president." Therein lies the problem. And now you want to clamor for a parliamentary system of government. You can as well feed the government. You can as well feed the government of Nigeria to the vultures, because I don't think it will even be functional. The parliamentary system is based, and then with the way we run our parliamentary system, we copied the the bicameral legislature, which means two houses. We copied that from Britain. But what Britain does is that Britain does not allow for since a house is being elected and re-elected, they have a House of Lords and a House of Commons. Now, the House of Lords would be like, let's say, we would have the House of Obas, the Serkis, and the Bale. The Obas, the Serkis, the Bales, and the Obis, or in eastern Nigeria. And if we had a house like that, it could show, a permanency in law, in translating law, or continuality, because they would now be changed as they change their thrones, and it keeps a little stability in our laws. Those are things that we are not even ready for. Or do we want to continue the green chambers and the red chambers of people who just stroll in and do not even know what they're talking about, and we don't even meet half at a Senate sitting, we do not even meet half representation. So the parliamentary system, no, we're not that politically mature. We're not even there at all, and that's the truth. And if you look at when Nigeria was using a parliamentary system, look at the quality of politicians we had. If you had somebody like you played a video just now, and Tafawa Balewa was talking about Nigeria's position. If you had Tafawa Balewa's talk, if you had Nnamdi Azikiwe's talk, it's not even their delivery of the English. It's the level of which they understood a national identity. They understood a national federal character, and they understood what legislation was. Right now, the country is in a disarray. I cannot and never would support parliamentary system, and I can never advise it being a sensible option for Nigeria.
But if you look at the call for the reduction in cost of governance in Nigeria and look at how many seats there are in the National Assembly, for the House of Senate, we have 109 members, 109 seats. And then for the legislature, which is the House of Representatives, we have 360 members put together. Now, if you look at what that would take in terms of funding the constituencies that they represent, and there have been calls for reduction in the cost of governance, would you say the argument for the call for Nigeria to move to a parliamentary system should not move forward?
I don't even understand. If we are going to cut the cost in governance, what's the problem with the cost in governance? First and foremost, constituency projects which the so-called National Assembly, that's 469 members, are being allowed to carry, is non-constitutional, meaning the money being given for constituency projects is totally against the law, and you can check that up. Now, if that is not existent, let's also look at the problems with the National Assembly presently. National Assembly's a member's salary is 500,000. That's why they always talk about their salaries or say they are giving their salaries. But that's not where the problem is. The problem is in their allowances. The allowances of the House of Rep rise as much as up to 32 million. And in the Senate, it rises as high as almost 45 million. If you're giving that kind of money to singular people who are redundant and not doing anything, pulls up a high cost of governance. For me, I've always been a proponent of this. Let's have people in the National Assembly and let's state their salaries at minimum wage. If we have their salaries at minimum wage, only the people that want to do the job will go there and then legislate properly. So the problem is how much we throw into the National Assembly, not that the National Assembly is too large. 469 people legislating for a country of 200 million isn't bad. It's very good. It's fair. What is the problem is the abuse of constituency projects, which are totally not constitutional. And then the Nigerian National Assembly ends higher than the Americans, ends higher than almost anywhere in the world. And for me, that's where the real problem lies. So even like I said earlier, I'm not even going to discuss parliamentary system of government because we have a failed National Assembly. You cannot now discuss a government that's based on legislation. So I think the only reason Nigerians clamor for it is because most of them do not understand what parliamentary government means. And parliamentary is based on full legislation. If you watch the British House of Commons, you'll notice that their sittings are always conversations over legislation and arguments and whatever. We have people that sleep in the National Assembly. You want to throw yourself into under legislation? No, we're not ready for it. We're not politically mature for a parliamentary system of government at all. We're not nowhere near it.
All right. So basically, a school of politics and governance would easily trace our issues to elections. Electing credible persons into offices, electing the right candidates into various political offices would, they'd say, would be the way to ensure good governance, and of course the dividends of democracy. But then for you to elect credible persons, there has to be free and fair elections. Now, we've noticed suppression of voters, voter apathy, and even electoral violence mar the elections in Nigeria. And then the continuous litigations experienced even after the elections by the losing parties or persons, I mean, could go on and on even throughout the tenure of the person who has been elected into office. Now, what's the problem here? What are the key challenges that the Independent National Electoral Commission has in conducting free and fair elections? And then how can we improve voter participation?
So at the Electoral College Nigeria, we do not believe that the problem of Nigeria is just elections. It's a bit more than that. The biggest problem Nigeria has is participation. And we want to participate at the point of our PVCs. But by then, we do not have an election. What we have is a selection. So as long as Nigerians do not participate in political parties, participate in primaries, they will be served any jig-jack, any Abdul, Eze, and Tunde that decides to run for office. And at that point, they have to pick between the devil and the blue sea. And that's where the first anomaly in politics comes from. The second, and then the second part of that participation is, as long as we're not participatory, Nigeria has not met 50% of its voter population participating in an election since 2015. That is highly poor. Last elections was about 28% of voting population. And an election can only be rigged. And I've worked on the ground, worked on the field, worked, with different places, run for office personally. So I know these things. So an election can only be rigged if you're not on ground. And if Nigerians don't understand that, then we have a bigger problem. As regards INEC has functioned below par, far below par. I would say the Electoral Act also gives INEC quite a lot of leeway to do some funny things. Voter suppression is not our only problem. Our biggest problem is actually the money spent in politics, which the law and the Electoral Act already stops people from spending. So I'll give you an example. The Electoral Act clearly states that if you're running for local government chairman, for example, you cannot spend up to 25 million. But there are states that sell their forms for local government chairman at almost 10 million. Is that not in defiance of that particular law? And by the time they finish with delegates and their party, before they even move into election, move into campaigns, they've already spent that 25 million. It goes up to president not being able to spend 5 billion while running for office. I'll tell you, the top four parties that end over 1 million votes in the 2023 elections all spent above 40 billion naira preceding campaigns. So you cannot, the problems in Nigeria, I think we've refused to go back to what we're exactly supposed to deal with our elections. Before we even talk about free and fair elections, the rigging starts from the beginning. I'll give you another example. In 2023 elections, it is in the Electoral Act clearly to state that the Electoral Act clearly states that every party must submit its membership lists electronically and manually to the commission. None of the 18 political parties met this. If you're already breaking laws in the Electoral Act preceding, let's also look at campaign conversations in which no station is allowed to harbor advice against any candidate. And the Electoral Act is clear: if you've given so candidates so time, you must give to others at equal basis. We break these laws left, right, and center. There's also within the Electoral Act, there's also the conversation, I think it's 92.1, or I can't remember the exact part, where it clearly states that state machinery cannot be used in an election, which means that even if the president is rerunning an election, if he's going to fly the presidential jet, his campaign team must pay for the presidential jet because that is state machinery. This goes to governors using cars, etc., etc. These laws are there, but there's no enforcement, there's nothing. So the problems are beyond voter suppression, because a lot of things happen which give birth to voter suppression. So if you break the laws from the start, the final day, which is the last day of elections, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to be a mayhem. So the problem in Nigeria is that we do not know the laws. We have so much problems, and this is the situation. This is the laws are broken far before even the elections, far before the elections.
Okay, so while you were talking, you talked about how participation should not start from getting PVCs. Let's look at participation from the party level. When it gets to elections and primaries are being conducted within parties, sometimes you find that some party members are disgruntled with the way the primaries are conducted. Some feel like they've been loyal and faithful to the parties, but you find some newcomers or those who are seen as not being old enough or having contributed enough to the party rising as flag bearers of the parties, which brings us to the cost of participation in election in Nigeria, whether as the electorate or one who's seeking or who's vying for office. So if you're vying for office in Nigeria, the cost of the form alone, we know how expensive it is, and we know what it is right now with the vote buying situation, the cost of campaigns and others. So do you think that is an issue of some Nigerians not wanting to participate, or it's an issue of not having economic power to participate at the level of being in parties?
Okay, so you spoke about what Nigerians know. I'm going to talk about what they don't know. So it is okay in Nigeria for you to say a newcomer came in or whatever. What you seem to skip was something I mentioned earlier. If we do not know that we are breaking the bank or the laws of Nigeria, not the bank, let me say, breaking the laws of Nigeria by spending so amount on campaigns, then it means that this race will continue. If we do not know that we're supposed to be part of a primaries, it's not for just, look at the DNCs in America. That's the Democratic National Convention. Look at the RNC, that's the Republican National Convention. Massive. Look at the Labour Party in the UK when they decide to have something. It's massive, or the Tories, or etc. It's massive. But here, we just for party conventions, we have just like, and no party on paper in Nigeria has up to 50,000 members. No party in Nigeria, and that is already stating that a few people make these decisions on the behest of others, and that already is not a democracy. A democracy can only thrive when everybody is involved in it. So at least we should have 70% of Nigeria's voting population in political parties. 70% of Nigeria's voting population puts us at about approximately close to 74 million people. We don't even have 3 million people in political parties today, registered as political party members in 18 body. And so therein lies the major problem. Now, if you're talking about people that say nowhere in the world, and I've run for office before, so in 2019, and I was a candidate, so not that I just bought a form, I was on the ballot. Nowhere in the world do you wake up and say, okay, not too young to run allows me run, and then you just wake up and say you want to run for office. No, running for office is a project 20-year plan. You start in the game, you rise in the game, you move up. And I've seen this, and I've conducted primaries also when I was National Publicity Secretary of the party. I also knew that most people just come into a party and want their will. It doesn't work that way. If you haven't put in the effort, I'll tell you, in 3 years, I was able to put enough effort to rise from a normal member to director of strategy to becoming National Publicity Secretary. The youngest at the time, that was 34 in 2015. I was 34 and the National Publicity Secretary. That was unheard of at that time. This is before Not Too Young to Run bill, but I earned it. I didn't just drop from the sky. I'm not from a big political family. So politics is a long-term game. It's progress, it's plan. And people always feel disjointed. How much do we support our candidates in Nigeria? Is it by putting WhatsApp DPs or placing their face or arguing touts on Facebook. I don't think that's what political support is. Political support is you put your money behind the candidate. How many people have put their monies behind the candidate? So as long as you do not put your money behind the candidate, you cannot be the godfather to that candidate. And you cannot be the godfather to that candidate. The person with the larger money who puts the money behind the candidate becomes the real godfather and dictator of what happens to the Nigerian people. And for me, we don't. So it's the things we don't know that are the problem, not the things that we know.
All right, thank you so much, Kunle Lawal. Thank you so much. I mean, you've spoken very passionately. I admire your gusts, your zest, and I've gleaned from your experience. And little did I know that at 34, that you were a national publicity secretary of a party. We're hoping that some of the conversations will spark a need to start casting a new vision, a new nation, looking forward looking in the direction of trying to improve the situation of things in Nigeria. And of course, gearing towards development in all aspects. I sincerely appreciate you for joining us, but we need to move on to, the second half of the show, as we have another guest on the program. Thank you so much, Kunle Lawal.
Very much. It's been my pleasure, and have enjoyed your independence.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.